The last normal day of my career ended with a can of expired ginger ale and the vague scent of mildew coming from the break room ceiling tile we'd all collectively agreed to ignore since Q3. I was finishing up the final reconciliation report, my yearly ritual, when I saw the email subject line that would age me 5 years in 2 seconds flat. Please verify compliance status. Tier 1 vendor agreement Devlin. My name. Not the department, not operations. Just Devlin, which meant they hadn't updated the contract after all. Still tied to me. Still writing my signature like a ghost at the feast. I stared at it, heart slow and heavy, the way you stare at a glass of milk after it's been in the car overnight. But let me back up, just enough for you to hate this with me in the right order. 10 years. That's how long I gave them. I was there before the snacks were gluten-free and the interns had full-sleeve tattoos. I was there when supply chain breakdowns made grown men cry on Zoom, and somehow I found us microcontrollers when the rest of the industry was bartering kidneys for capacitors. I didn't have a flashy title. I had results. Contracts locked in blood. Vendors who answered my calls on Sunday mornings. Hell, I had one guy who named his Labrador after me. Olivia the dog. But around year 8, I started noticing things. Not like alien abduction things. Subtle things. Like how my input on cost savings strategies started getting paraphrased in meetings by some fresh hire with an underbite and a subscription to thought leader podcasts. Or how the CEO, Jeff, began introducing me in meetings as one of our legacy stars. Legacy. You know, like AOL or polio. Brought in a VP of Ops who looked like he shopped exclusively from Instagram ads, flawless skin, no idea where screws came from. He's young, but hungry, Jeff told me over stale shrimp cocktails one Friday. Think of him as your shadow. My shadow? Honey, shadows follow you. This guy was in front of me every damn day trying to teach me how procurement works like I hadn't hand-signed the documentation that kept the factory lights on through COVID. Now, this is usually where I'd tell you how I felt seen or valued in non-traditional ways. Nope, I felt like a can of beans at the back of the shelf. Useful in a crisis. Forgotten otherwise. It's funny, you start picking up the scent of your own replacement like roadkill in July. HR went from polite to slippery. Calendar invites turned into accidental removals. I'd walk past rooms I used to run and hear my own strategies getting regurgitated back in an espresso-stained voice by someone named Trent. So I started preparing. Not out of revenge, not yet, just instinct. I exported copies of contract snapshots. I took notes on vendor history and saved them to a personal encrypted drive. No drama, just insurance, like checking for exits when you walk into a church. And that's when I saw it again. The clause, buried in a supplier agreement I'd negotiated 2 years ago when Jeff, in his infinite laziness, told me to just sign it under your name for now, we'll formalize it later. It was a $675 million contract with our biggest supplier. The onboarding was hell. Legal was understaffed. And I, like the idiot soldier I was, stepped up and personally guaranteed the damn thing to get it done on time, with Jeff's initials, his full support. Verbal promises of you'll be covered. And guess what? Nobody ever updated it. Clause 14, paragraph B. In the event of role separation, the personal guarantor retains discretionary power to continue or terminate the agreement unless formally discharged in writing. It was still active, still mine, still humming under the surface like a buried landmine. Now look, before we go any further, if you're one of the many folks listening to this while pretending to check email, just do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and toss a like. Seriously, it helps more than you know. We're just a small team telling big stories, and we don't have a budget for emotional support peacocks or sparkling water with electrolytes. So yeah, click that thing. All right, back to the mess. So there I was, sitting on a silent grenade, wondering if anyone in the shiny new youthful leadership lineup had read any of the contracts before putting on their VR headsets and hosting virtual coffee breaks. I gave it another week, just in case someone figured it out. No one did, and that's when I knew something wicked was coming. Not loud, not dramatic, just inevitable, because in this place, the most dangerous thing isn't what they say, it's what they forget. The new VP's name was Austin, but I called him PowerPoint in a suit. You know the type? Face like a baby seal, handshake like cold oatmeal, and a vocabulary built entirely out of words like synergy and momentum. He walked in on his first day wearing loafers that cost more than my divorce, introduced himself with a smirk and a 4-minute story about how his MBA thesis went viral on LinkedIn. Then he said, I'm excited to learn from the veterans before I really start optimizing things. I smiled politely. Internally, I was already mapping his trajectory from eager learner to executive parasite. At first, he just hovered, sat in on my supplier calls, took notes like a courtroom sketch artist, asked questions that had all the nutritional value of cotton candy. Why do we still use net 30 instead of leveraging dynamic discounting? Because, sweetheart, you negotiated locked-in rates through a global pandemic while your generation was still making TikToks about oat milk. That's why, but I didn't say that. I just smiled, nodded, and added his name to the list of people I'd eventually be feeding to the legal department if things went sideways. Meanwhile, whispers began fluttering through the office like fruit flies. Restructuring, leadership refresh, alignment for Q1, HR's new favorite phrase, we're just reviewing roles holistically. Translation, someone's getting axed and it won't be the guy with a crypto podcast. My calendar invites started glitching. Meetings I'd organized were suddenly internal only. Slack channels I created got archived overnight. I'd walk into rooms and feel the temperature drop, not in hostility, but in absence. Absence of eye contact. Absence of acknowledgement, like I was already a ghost and nobody had gotten around to telling me. Then came the HR dodgeball. I requested a meeting with Denise, our HR director, to clarify some language in a vendor renewal. She smiled like a hostage on Zoom and said, let's touch base next week once Austin has settled in. When next week came, she was out sick. The week after, double booked. The week after that, 15-minute check-in that consisted entirely of her blinking rapidly and overusing the word evolution. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. So I did what women like me have always done when the ground starts shifting, we brace. Quietly, smartly, thoroughly. I started transferring copies of key vendor agreements to a personal encrypted folder on my drive. Not to steal, not to sabotage, just to protect myself. Just in case. Every document I saved had a memory attached. This one I signed in a Tokyo hotel at 2 a.m. during a supply chain panic. That one took 6 months of phone calls and 2 bottles of scotch to close, and all of them had my name, not Austin's, not Jeff's, mine. I also downloaded every email thread related to the personal guarantee clause. You know, just in case someone tried to gaslight me later and say it never existed, or worse, that I volunteered it without clearance. I had Jeff's voice memo approving the move saved in 3 formats and backed up in 4 locations. I wasn't going down for their amnesia. There was no anger, no bitterness, just an electric stillness in my chest like standing on the beach and watching the water pull back far too quickly. Austin started asking more questions. Subtler ones. So, when you're out of office, who typically covers your vendors? Nobody, Austin. Because when I take a vacation, the supply chain weeps and CFOs get stress hives. But go off, King. Then came the transition documents request. He sent it with a smiley face in the subject line. Olivia knowledge transfer, yay, yay. I opened the doc. 36 blank fields asking me to map out all my relationships, negotiation tactics, escalation contacts, vendor preferences, and soft levers. I didn't fill it out. I printed it, highlighted the most insulting questions, then shredded it 1 page at a time while eating a ham sandwich and listening to Fleetwood Mac. Because if they wanted a world without me, they were going to get exactly what they asked for starting now. The real kicker, no one even followed up. No angry email, no reminder, just silence, like they thought I'd either comply out of habit or disappear quietly. And that's when I realized they'd already made the decision. They weren't onboarding Austin, they were offboarding me. They held the holiday party at one of those new industrial chic places, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, overpriced sliders that looked like they were made by someone who hated bread. I wore black, not because I knew, just because I always did. One of the new interns said I looked like a Bond villain, and I told her thank you before she realized it wasn't a joke. The whole thing smelled like white wine and corporate guilt. Everyone was pretending to be jolly while watching the CFO sweat through his Christmas sweater, and the marketing director fake laugh at jokes from a man who thought women's soccer was adorable. I stood near the back by the coat check, sipping a warm Pinot Grigio and counting how many people avoided eye contact with me. Then Jeff, our esteemed CEO and part-time LinkedIn philosopher, clinked his glass, and everything froze. He didn't have a speech prepared. That was obvious. He never did. He just liked hearing himself talk. This year, he slurred, already 2 bourbons deep, has been one of transformation. Growth, realignment. We're shedding the old skin and embracing the next generation. I felt my stomach turn to wet cement. I knew what was coming, but I still wasn't ready for the exact phrasing. And with that, Jeff said, grinning like he'd invented time travel, I'd like to thank Olivia Devlin for her service. 10 years of dedication, but it's time to pass the torch. Silence, then a few claps, nervous ones, the kind of claps people do when they're not sure if they just witnessed a firing or a surprise retirement. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't drop my drink or demand an explanation. I just stared at him. The man who once called me at 3 a.m. from Shanghai to beg me to fix a supplier blackout. The man whose signature was still at the bottom of a $675 million contract tied to my name. He didn't even look at me. Just raised his glass and said, to the future. Someone next to me whispered, is this a joke? It wasn't. I finished my wine in one long, slow sip. Walked to the table by the door where they'd put a stack of branded gift bags full of peppermint bark and discount spa coupons. I picked one up, set it back down. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my badge. It was a little scratched around the edges, the lamination starting to bubble. I'd worn it so long the photo looked like someone who no longer existed. I placed it on the table and walked out. No dramatic exit, no slammed doors, no final words, just the soft clack of my boots on polished concrete and the stunned silence of a room full of people realizing too late they might have just witnessed something irreversible. I drove home in silence. Didn't even turn on the radio. Just sat with the sound of the heater clicking and the distant ring of humiliation clanging in my ears like church bells. No one called that night. No text from HR. No apology from Jeff. No follow-up, no paperwork. No official termination notice. As far as the system was concerned, I still existed. But as far as the company was concerned, I'd been erased. They thought my silence meant surrender. What they didn't realize was that I was just giving them the exact thing they wanted, the future. December crawled like a dying animal. No severance. No Cobra packet. No thank you for your years of service mug. Just silence, like I'd been quietly assassinated by HR and buried under the breakroom tiles. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, an email, a phone call, maybe even a LinkedIn message from someone brave enough to say, hey, that was messed up. But nothing came. Not even from Denise in HR, who once cried in my office over a failed engagement and borrowed my chapstick like we were in a goddamn sorority. So I sat at my kitchen table in my old flannel robe, eating stale wheat thins and drinking coffee that had been reheated twice, maybe 3 times. The kind of coffee that tastes like regret and scorched ambition. My phone sat face down. My inbox sat unopened. I didn't want to see the auto-replies from people who hadn't even noticed I was gone. The tree was up, barely. A sad fake pine I dragged down from the attic because tradition told me I should. No ornaments, just dust. I stared at it like it owed me answers. Eventually, I did what I always do when the world turns cold. I went to work. Not for them, for me. I opened my old laptop, the one I used when I was still allowed to be someone. Dug through old project folders, vendor records, procurement trackers. It was all there, names, numbers, notes scribbled in margin comments no one else ever read. And then I found it. The contract. Supplier, Veritech Components. Total value $675 million. Personal guarantee, Olivia M. Devlin, Clause 14. Still active, still under my name. I remember the day we signed it. Jeff was in a panic because our legal team was swamped and the onboarding process with Veritech had stalled. Just sign it under your name for now, he said, sipping a smoothie like it was a blood pact. We'll formalize it later. I'll back you up. He never did, but I kept the voice memo. Jeff, somewhere in Cabo or Vegas or whatever hole he liked to crawl into, saying, you're covered. I'll handle it if it ever comes up. I had receipts. And now, 2 years later, the clause was still humming like an unexploded bomb, buried under all their forgetfulness and arrogance. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were cold. My wine glass was empty. Somewhere outside, kids were playing in the snow, probably building things that wouldn't collapse under them. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old contacts until I found her, Janice Tran. Senior Account Director, Veritech. We'd worked through supply collapses, shipping delays, vendor disputes. She once overnighted a crate of lithium batteries through a snowstorm just because I asked nicely. I hit call. Olivia, she answered on the second ring, surprise cracking through her voice like glass. Hey Janice, I said, keeping my tone light. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. God. No, wait, are you okay? We heard rumors, something about a transition. That's one word for it, I said, trying not to sound like I was unraveling in a bathrobe. Listen, I'm reviewing old paperwork and I wanted to confirm something. The compliance memo, Q1 renewal, did they follow up after? The shift, silence on her end. Janice, she sighed, no, we flagged it. Send a nudge to the new VP, Austin something. No reply. We assumed you were still on it. Nothing's been updated in the system. Still has your name as guarantor. I closed my eyes, let the silence thicken, and if compliance isn't renewed by January 1st, I asked. We're authorized to trigger the clause, terminate or transfer. It's in your name, Olivia. You can still pull it or keep it. I opened my eyes. The world looked a little different now. Sharper, colder, clearer. Thanks, Janice, I said. You okay? She asked again, voice softer now. No, I said. But I'm working on it. When I hung up, I stared at the contract again. At the line with my name, the date, the clause, they forgot I signed it. They forgot who held the pen. But I didn't. I registered the LLC on a Wednesday. Snow fell in sloppy wet chunks outside my window as I typed out the name, M. Devlin Strategic Advisory. Not Olivia. Not tied to my old identity. Just the maiden name they never bothered to learn, stitched neatly into a shell company they wouldn't see coming until it was too damn late. I used a private mailbox in a nearby town and a quiet, no-frills law firm that specialized in keeping things invisible. No LinkedIn announcements. No press release. Just a clean digital footprint and an EIN linked to a fresh bank account I hadn't touched since my mother passed. Setting up the consultancy felt less like starting a business and more like building a bunker. Every decision was quiet, measured, cold. I didn't feel victorious. I felt surgical, like I was sawing away the last dead limb of loyalty still clinging to my ribcage. By the end of the day, I had a logo, a website with exactly one page for strategic inquiries, contact directly, and a direct line set up on a burner phone. It buzzed once before midnight. It was Janice. We're fed up, she said without any preamble. No compliance check-ins. No QBR follow-ups. Your replacements don't answer their phones. One of them asked if our invoice had a QR code for Venmo. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming into the sink. Would you be open to a short-term compliance retainer? She continued. Just through Q1, keep things from imploding. Unofficially, what name would it be under? I asked. She paused, then said, Devlin Advisory. You're listed as the guarantor anyway. Might as well make it official. I said yes. She sent a preliminary engagement letter by midnight, and just like that, the fuse was lit. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, because I was ready. While the rest of the city shoved cinnamon into overpriced cocktails and pretended New Year's was a fresh start, I was in my apartment reviewing the clause one more time. January 1st was the final date for compliance renewal. I knew it wouldn't come. Austin probably didn't even know the login credentials to the supplier portal. And Jeff? He was likely on a yacht somewhere with a woman who called him babe and thought procurement was a hair removal treatment. They weren't just arrogant, they were inattentive. And in business, that's how empires fall, not with a scandal, but with a shrug. I made no calls, sent no warnings. They wanted me gone. They made it loud and clear, so I gave them exactly what they asked for: nothing. No heads up, no final courtesy email, no just-in-case reminder. They stripped me of dignity in front of the company Christmas tree, surrounded by half-eaten canapes and bourbon breath. I wasn't giving them anything they didn't earn. I used the week between Christmas and New Year's to prepare the internal documentation for the supplier transfer. In case things triggered as expected, I wanted my side clean. The consulting contract included a clause allowing for non-compete bypass due to my unique compliance history with the client. All perfectly legal, all perfectly dry. Austin sent out a company-wide Slack message on December 29th bragging about how he'd automated end-of-year vendor touchpoints using a CRM plugin. Janice forwarded it to me with one line: he thinks software replaces relationships. I didn't reply. I just filed it under exhibits for later and added a post-it to my wall. No mercy. No second chances. New Year's Eve came. I stayed in. No resolutions. No champagne. Just chamomile tea and a single printed copy of the Veritech contract on my dining room table, weighed down by a small ceramic elephant my sister gave me years ago for luck. At midnight, fireworks went off outside. The sky lit up in bursts of pink and silver while some neighbor screamed lyrics to a song no one had liked since 2011. And I sat there, eyes on the date in the corner of my screen. January 1st. No compliance renewal. No update in the portal. No formal discharge of my personal guarantee, which meant in 24 hours they'd be in breach. I didn't toast. I didn't smile. I just stared at the screen and whispered, let it burn. January 2nd started like any other Tuesday: gray sky, old radiator ticking like a metronome of petty vengeance, and the neighbor's cat screaming at a squirrel. I brewed my coffee slowly, letting the silence thicken around me. My laptop sat unopened on the kitchen table, the Veritech portal minimized but logged in, blinking softly in the corner of my screen like a secret only I remembered. At 9:02 a.m., the first email came through. Subject: Notice of Clause Invocation Devlin Guarantor. Active, no frills, no drama. Just a PDF attached with the kind of bone-dry legal precision that says, this is not a drill. Veritech had officially pulled the ripcord. Due to noncompliance with Q1 terms, the personal guarantee clause had been triggered. The $675 million contract was now in temporary freeze status. Inventory held, shipments paused. Payment schedules suspended pending reassignment or resolution with the original guarantor, me. Within minutes, a storm began to unfold from somewhere deep inside their shiny headquarters. Though I wasn't there to see it, I imagined it perfectly. Jeff walking in late from his Vision Reset weekend, still wearing sunglasses indoors. Austin humming some motivational podcast jingle under his breath. Then someone in operations, probably poor Carla, opening the supplier portal and seeing the word frozen blinking next to every order number. I pictured the silence hitting like a bomb. Then the scramble, phones ringing, Slack exploding, legal wheeled in like a trauma team. Jeff barking, who signed this? Austin trying to deflect with, I thought Olivia was taken off the account. Wasn't that finalized? And then legal, disheveled, annoyed, underpaid, pulling up the contract. Scrolling, pausing, going pale. Clause 14. They'd say, voice flattening, still under Olivia Devlin. No discharge filed. Can we override it? Jeff would ask. No, not unless she transfers it or kills it. And that's when the real panic would start. Frozen inventory meant missed production deadlines. Missed deadlines meant penalty clauses. Penalties meant a chain reaction through every department from logistics to finance to investor relations. And all of it, every frozen pallet, every stalled container, every single day of silence was their own fault. Because they forgot the one thing that still mattered, me. I didn't answer the phone that day. Let every call ring through. Didn't open the company group chat I'd been forcibly removed from 2 weeks prior. Didn't respond to Denise's quick favor, can you clarify something urgent? Email that sounded like she'd typed it while crying into a lean cuisine. Instead, I took my tea to the window and watched the city. People walked by in coats they didn't like, holding coffee they couldn't afford, making resolutions they wouldn't keep. And somewhere in a glass office 3 floors above where I used to sit, men who called me legacy baggage were realizing that the contract they once rushed through, the one they pressured me to sign under duress, was now strangling them in full daylight. Janice forwarded me the internal email from their side. Supplier had cited significant compliance risk and loss of trust in operational continuity as reasons for the clause invocation. They'd included one final line: "We are happy to continue under the existing agreement with Miss Devlin or her authorized entity." I smiled. It wasn't joy. It wasn't glee. It was gravity finally doing its job. I didn't have to lift a finger. They tripped over the very rope they handed me, and I just watched the curtain fall. The audit hit harder than the clause. Sometime between 10:30 a.m. and lunch, someone in legal finally made it past their fourth panic espresso and opened the damn folder labeled Supplier Veritech Legacy. Inside, a contract with a digital trail so clear it practically had GPS coordinates stamped on each clause. There it was, black and white, time-stamped, and PDF stamped. In the absence of a formal discharge filed with the supplier, the personal guarantor listed herein maintains discretionary authority over continuation, renegotiation, or revocation of contract terms, as authorized under Section 14. And there, directly below it, the signature box: Olivia M. Devlin Guarantor, April 14, 2 years ago. And just beneath that, sloppy, half-digital, half-scanned in with coffee stains and desperation, were the handwritten initials of one Jeffrey Allen Novick, CEO. His attempt at plausible deniability crumbled faster than Austin's post-MBA confidence. According to Janice, the back and forth started within the hour. Jeff, now cornered, hair likely doing that sweaty wave thing it did when investors got mouthy, tried a new angle. He emailed Veritech's legal department personally, subject line all caps, urgent, contractual ambiguity/unfair reliance. It read like a man trying to unshoot a gun, full of phrases like assumed termination by role cessation, verbal revocation, and reasonable expectation of transfer. He might as well have ended it with "We cool?" They were not cool. Veritech replied with precision. Bullet points, attachments, receipts. Included was a full audit trail of every interaction they'd had with the company since the clause was enacted. The original PDF, meeting minutes from a call where Jeff explicitly asked Olivia to take the lead, and a short, sweet email from Olivia dated the same day, signed under instruction from CEO, expecting formal discharge post-onboarding. It was never filed, and worse, Veritech included a screen capture of Jeff's Slack message from that week, the one he sent while sipping a piña colada in a Hawaiian shirt saying, "Just have Liv handle it. She's the only one who reads the fine print anyway, lol." That lol aged like milk in the sun. Legal dread swept through the company like a virus. HR, finance, and the board all started pinging one another in a frenzy, trying to figure out how something so big had been ignored so thoroughly. The operations team, blissfully unaware until now, found out their upcoming Q1 production run was at risk of collapse. Distribution partners began asking questions. Investors smelled blood, and Jeff, he stopped emailing. According to Janice, he canceled his meetings, shut his office door, and started making calls from his personal cell. Desperate calls, whispered calls. "How do we fix this?" Calls, "You can't." It wasn't just that they missed the clause, it was that they didn't even think to check. They assumed I'd go quietly, that I'd vanish like a shadow when the lights got too bright, that someone like Austin could just absorb my role like downloading a new app. But I didn't disappear. I reappeared. In the one place they never thought to look, the fine print they all ignored. I spent that day in a cozy cafe, eating a cinnamon scone and reviewing a supplier memo for my consultancy's new client, Veritech. Quiet work, clean work. Work that paid 3 times my old salary and didn't come with condescending emails about intergenerational leadership. I got a single text from Denise HR. "Hey, Jeff may want to talk. Are you open to a call?" I let it sit unread, because there's a difference between revenge and recognition. They didn't just lose a contract. They lost the one person who never needed a title to carry the weight. And now, they were the ones staring at a document they never understood, realizing too late who had been holding the pen all along. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7 a.m. Digital invite slapped together so hastily it still had placeholder text in the notes. "Insert agenda here." No one cared, they just needed to stop the bleeding. I wasn't there, obviously, but I heard things. Janice called me that afternoon, voice wrapped in equal parts awe and morbid curiosity. "They looked like they'd all just come out of a funeral," she said. "No pleasantries, just spreadsheets, redline forecasts, and Jeff screaming into mute buttons." Apparently, the CFO was the first to break. After Veritech sent their final notice, clean, bullet-pointed, and merciless, he stood, adjusted his tie, and walked out without saying a word. No argument, no apology, just one look at the projected losses from a frozen $675 million pipeline and the realization that he was about to be crucified for someone else's arrogance. Then came the investors. 3 major ones dialed in from Dubai, New York, and God knows where else. Each one colder than the last. "I'm not seeing a contingency plan," one of them said. Why is a critical contract still under a terminated employee's authority? Said another. Jeff tried spinning it, of course, said it was a clerical error, a communication gap during year-end transitions, but Veritech had already pulled the pin. The final nail came via email. One Janice forwarded me with the subject line, "Heads up, it's official." From Veritech's VP of Procurement. Due to consistent breakdowns in compliance and operational responsiveness, we are transferring our contractual relationship to M. Devlin Strategic Advisory, effective immediately. Miss Devlin's historical knowledge and execution track record present the only viable path to continuity. They didn't even try to sugarcoat it. They didn't say re-engage or consult. They said transfer. As in, the pipeline, the relationship. The trust, they weren't just cutting the contract loose. They were giving it to me. Jeff lost it. Janice said he slammed a folder so hard it knocked over his overpriced water bottle. Started yelling about NDAs and non-competes and her loyalty to this company. The irony was so thick I could taste it through the phone. And then, in front of the entire board and two of the lead investors, he made the ask. Get her on the phone. Right now. We'll bring her back. Silence followed. Janice, watching from the supplier side, said it felt like the air had gone out of the room. Everyone looking at each other, pretending like someone else would be the one to volunteer. Eventually, Denise called. She didn't even try to be casual. Jeff wants to talk, she said. They want to offer reinstatement. Full title, retro pay, even an equity bump, whatever you need. I let it hang for a few beats. Then I answered the only way that felt right. No, a pause, I mean. Maybe just hear him out? She tried, voice small now. You could come in as a consultant, shape the new team. There's a lot of potential, Denise, I said, calm as ever. They fired me over sliders and warm champagne. They made a public spectacle out of discarding me. And now that their ship's on fire, they want me to patch the hull? No, I don't fix things for free, not anymore. Silence again. This time, the kind that understood it had been earned. Back at HQ, Jeff reportedly sat down hard in his leather chair, let out a long breath, and muttered, "She's really not coming back, is she?" No one answered. I was already in my new office, modest, clean window facing the river, reviewing updated Q1 schedules and onboarding two new junior analysts who actually read contracts before signing them. The old company? Still bleeding. Still scrambling, still pretending that the youthful vision plan wasn't just a fever dream with a LinkedIn filter slapped on top. But me, I was calm, focused, and most importantly, completely out of reach. They'd burned the bridge, but I'd paved my own road. The final call wasn't scheduled. It just happened, a collision of desperation and formality stitched together in real time. Jeff didn't even bother dressing for it. Janice told me later he looked like a high school principal caught in a lie, collar crooked, eyes darting, hands gripping a stress ball that was definitely losing the battle. The rep from Veritech, an old contact named Gerard, opened the call without pleasantries. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. Just opened a hard copy of the contract and began to read. In the event of role separation, he said, voice steady, the personal guarantor retains power of continuation or revocation unless formally discharged in writing. He paused, looked directly into the camera. Behind him, a digital document pulsed on screen, Olivia M. Devlin's signature circled in red. Do you have a discharge form on file? He asked. No one spoke, not Jeff, not Denise, not the general counsel whose job it had been to file that paperwork. Just the sound of someone breathing heavily into their mic and a distant keyboard clicking as someone pretended to search for a document they knew damn well didn't exist. Legal? Gerard asked. The company's head of compliance, brought in 6 months ago to modernize the framework, cleared her throat. We do not appear to have a formal discharge in the system, she said, words landing like bricks. There is no filed release. Silence fell, kind of silence that eats through glass walls and buzzword-laden visions of the future. The kind that lives at the center of every boardroom horror story. It was the moment the team finally understood, not theoretically, not emotionally, but financially, that they had given a live grenade to a woman they'd tossed out with the catering trays. Gerard nodded once. Understood. Then the contract is legally binding with M. Devlin Strategic Advisory, effective immediately. Jeff blinked, but his mouth closed it. No one else spoke. Across town, in a warm office with glass doors and matte black fixtures, I was reviewing the new supplier ledger. The Veritech account was no longer marked with my name in the former signatory column. It was under my firm. Line by line, entry by entry, the numbers built like a symphony. $675 million, now routed through an LLC they never saw coming. One that bore no trace of Jeff's ego, Austin's incompetence, or Denise's silence. Just me, my name, my terms. I sipped my tea chamomile with a hint of lemon. My new assistant, Carrie, poked her head in. They confirmed payment terms for Q1, she said. Want me to send the first invoice? I looked up, smiled, said one word. Invoice them, and that was that. No court battle, no screaming match, no LinkedIn manifesto about empowerment or rebirth. Just quiet execution, precision over noise. They wanted me gone, and I gave them what they asked for, but they forgot who signed the damn thing. And now they pay. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.